Joining me now to assess Europe's next move is Anthony Dworkin. He's a Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you very much indeed for joining me today. If we look at what's been happening at the EU, it's quite interesting to hear France going out on a limb almost. I mean, the EU is very far from speaking with one voice at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. What we see is a very strong difference of emphasis, I would say, a difference of tone, a difference of language. Nicolas Sarkozy, the President of France, is really going, as you say, out on a limb. He's trying to set a very strong tone. I think partly because he wants to repair some damage that France suffered for its rather slow reaction in Tunisia and Egypt. But, you know, in terms of substance, no one is saying there should be military action now. But I think what France and to some degree the UK would like is for that option really to be talked up, whereas other European countries are a lot more cautious.
But is there any chance that this would end up being a coalition of the willing, or do you think that something will only happen if we get, for example, a UN resolution or certainly EU consolidation on this?
There wouldn't, if there is military action in the form of enforcing a no-fly zone or something, that wouldn't be done by the EU. I think what the European leaders are trying to do is just to sort of get themselves on one page as much as possible. Military action would take place either in the context of NATO or conceivably a coalition of the willing, as you say. One of the interesting things that's coming out, I think particularly from the French president, is the notion that under some circumstances military action might be possible without a UN resolution. Now, very few other people are saying that. So, you know, we don't get a clear line from NATO, but there definitely is that notion coming from France on some idea of a kind of humanitarian emergency, a responsibility to protect if there was strong regional support, particularly from the Arab League. That's a tone we're getting from France that not many other countries are backing at this point.
This would be the moral argument here would be something like a Rwanda's type argument, or indeed what happened with Saddam Hussein and the Kurds, if there was an idea that there was some kind of chemical weapons being used.
That's right, exactly. Particularly yesterday, Sarkozy did mention the idea of chemical weapons, or also I think just very strong attacks against civilians. But the situation is complicated because at the moment it's a kind of military confrontation, an armed rebellion, rather than just clear attacks against civilians.
The one thing that seems to be quite interesting, more and more I've heard from those the rebel leaders that are interviewed on the ground, that they're actually asking for, yes, for a no-fly zone, but also for arms, specifically for arms. That's what they're running out of, arms and ammunition, they say. Now, what happens there? I mean, obviously, countries in the West have given plenty of arms to Libya in the past, but what would happen if one country decided that, like France, for example, that they were prepared to arm the rebels?
Well, one problem here is that the UN Security Council passed an arms embargo, so technically no one is supposed to be supplying arms to Libya at all.
Indeed.
Now, there's some question about whether the rebels could be excused from that in some way, but that's very unclear, and I think that adds to the complication. And I think, you know, there's a real division among European countries how far they want to get involved in the military side of this, as opposed to the humanitarian side.
Okay, Anthony Dworkin, thank you very much indeed.